To quit because Bucky actually would.
Now we're into the second part of chapter 1. We get seriously into belief once again. This time, the belief of JB, who is? And Nate. Oh, where's Nate? This one's for you, Nate.
There we go, B.
Now, in this latter part of chapter 1, we see the fledgling belief. Have to pass Beely around. Fledgling belief of JB and Nate, as well as the fledgling belief of Andrew, John, Philip, and Simon, according to our commentator, D.A. Carson. A fledgling belief that John appears to play with throughout his book, according to Carson, until John resolves his fledgling belief. A belief that John appears to play with by using the ever-popular word katalambano, the Greek word to describe that seizing of a belief. A pretty ambiguous word back then, according to our commentator Barrett. Well, I haven't shown you that Barrett book that I have, an ancient, from the 50s book that I fortuitously came upon early this summer, that is currently rated number 12 in the commentaries on John. So I fortuitously got this book, Commentary on John, and I'm going through it. I'm thinking, wow, why are all these passages highlighted that are in Carson's book? And it's my suspicion I actually have Carson's book somehow. So, according to Barrett, another commentator that we'll be referring to frequently, that pretty much is like our present day use of the word interesting. Kind of ambiguous. But in our verse 5, the word katalambano gets used in a much stronger sense than the ever-popular seize the day of Horace's day way back then. It was more than just some sappy slogan to John. It was a seizure of eternal import, a seizure of cosmic import, as we shall see, quizzers. And not some seizure by your human self either, no. It was even beyond a seizure of a child, as we might read in verse 13. It was this seizure about what belief God might sow or instill in you. Moving on, we see that such a belief is not something that may be seized by people in the very least. As you may recall from Luke, that belief appears to have been in JB even before he was born. Yep. It was noticeably present in him even while he leaped in his mother's womb. Yes. It was a gestational belief, and in utero belief. Very small belief. Very small. Oh, let's pass that belief around. Oh, just a small belief. Not exactly a bee, but so. And this belief was by no means some naturally derived understanding.
What?
but rather a supernaturally imputed understanding. And inception much closer to conception than to any visual perception of Jesus. Likewise, we will not be perceiving Jesus for quite some time yet, at least not in a natural sense. No. And even J.B. expressed some doubts about that supernatural sense as well later on in his career, as if you may recall in Luke 7. So, what about that belief of Nate then? Here we go, Nate. That belief of Nathaniel. The belief of that pretty genuine guy in whom Jesus found no guile. No guile. Wow. That's the way it reads in the King James. No guile. Or, as our new and improved NIV translates it, in whom Jesus found no deceit. The old NIV called it no deceit, which is a little too sweeping, it seems. So how did that sweeping belief of Nate evolve so crazy quickly, right? Well, according to our commentator Tenney, who we also will be referring to, there's pretty good reason to believe that Nate was meditating over an account from Genesis 28, just a little earlier on. That he was meditating on that ancient passage while under the shade of that nebulous fig tree. And perhaps puzzling over why a man so unworthy as Jacob would receive such a profound revelation and blessing from God, while good old Nate was not receiving any revelation at all. And then, presumably, Nate was praying for a similar or even a superior revelation due to his lack of Jacob's deceit or guile. Perhaps one of those shallow Jabez type prayers, thinking that he deserved way better due to his lack of Jacob's deceit. Perhaps even doing some boastful praying like David prayed. He said, I do not sit with deceitful men, as you may have read in Psalm 26. And then suddenly, Nate's prayers were answered in full, unlike a whole lot of our prayers, huh? It seems that the prayers of a righteous man availeth much, right? In James 5. Although it usually seems to take a whole lot more availing than that, as we might have read from Job in chapter 30. It seems Nate's prayers were rapidly taken to heaven, and the answer to his greatest prayers were about to be revealed on earth. Yes, the one that Moses wrote about was about to be revealed to him. A revelation that was now being promoted by his longtime buddy, Phil. Yep, Philip. Even though he kind of cynically told Phil to take a pill, Phil. Huh? From Nazareth? Are you kidding me? From Nazareth? Seriously? Phil, come on. A revelation that was then reinforced by Jesus suggesting something very pertinent to Nate. Apparently something about Nate and a fig tree. Something suggesting something more, it seems, than just his hanging around under this fig tree during the midday sun. Perhaps even suggesting an unrighteous hanging in that respect. An unrighteous hanging at night, perhaps, picking those figs or something worse. A suggestion convicting Nate of his urgent need for a Savior. His urgent need for holiness. His urgent need of a Messiah. And then Jesus followed up his convicting comment with that ascending and descending terminology of Genesis 28. Ascending. Oh, turn that alarm up, can we? Oh, one of my hang glider toys. Okay. Ascending and descending. Okay. And that was a comment that related to Nate for some reason. Some unknown reason. With a convicted Nate immediately joining that bunch of often ridiculed disciples. Immediately joining that earlier ridiculed church of the Nazarene. Perhaps a church of long-haired, freaky people that would not even look at alcohol. People from a region that would not even consider grape juice for the traditional Passover drink. Nope. They wouldn't even consider it since it may have fermented even a little bit. Yeah. Now that's pretty radical. So, yep, they were freaky people like Samson who were instructed to follow those Nazarite customs to a T. You may recall Samson being instructed indirectly by an angel in Judges 13. An angel that gave instructions to Samson's parents and then promptly ascended to heaven. The event causing the pious father of Samson to awfully cry out, "We have seen God." Yeah, so much truth to that. Who was that angel? However, it is also possible that all that allusion to ascending and descending stuff, it may be sheer speculation by Tenney. It may be. It may be just Tenney being naturally tenacious. But I still like that suggestion anyways. I still like it, even if he is a bit off chronologically. And sometimes John is off a little chronologically in his account as well. He's not quite as chronological as Luke is. And I still like it, even if Calvin says that Jesus was not just addressing Nate at this point. No, he was addressing you and me, ascending and descending. So, to summarize, those fledgling beliefs of JB and Nate were not a result of any personal worthiness whatsoever, despite what we might be inclined to believe. Just as the wily Jacob had little personal worthiness to speak of either. No, not even when he wrestled with the angel of God. Who was that angel? Since the wily Jacob, whose name essentially means seizing by the heel, you read in Genesis 25, since he was caught seizing his brother's heel at birth. Remember, they were twins. Or even worse, his name sometimes means supplanter, since he defrauded his father and his brother, Jacob, in Genesis 27. Yet, despite that gross unworthiness of Jacob, the Lord has chosen Jacob to be his own. Yep, chosen Israel to be his treasured possession, as we read in Psalm 135. That the Lord had chosen Jacob even before he was born, we read in Romans 9. So, no personal worthiness whatsoever in our above test cases of JB and Nate, since this belief was instilled in JB even before he was born. And even before he was born. Whoa. Yep. Even before then. Well, yeah, even before then. Whoa. So, here we go. It occurred even despite his skepticism. Now, in verse 37, when it says that Andrew and John followed Jesus, it only means that they followed in a general sense. That's all. It does not mean that they were full-fledged believers at this point. And that's pretty clear from the context. Pretty clear by their ambiguous answer as to why they were creeping Jesus in verses 38 and 39. And this followed word is also an intentionally ambiguous word that John appears to play with throughout his gospel, according to Carson. A word that John appears to play with since John is rather subtle, according to Carson. A pretty generic word since John does not truly know the hearts of men and their following, unlike Jesus. Now, let's get into some textual critical, the fun part that I like to play with, you might find boring. And we have a few issues, but I'm just going to tackle the worst issue here. And that's an issue that relates to this study. And this is an issue in verse 34, where we have some dispute again as to whether Jesus is described as the Son of God or as the chosen one of God, as per our verse 14. With both Carson and textual critic Philip Comfort siding with our new NIV. Hooray, our new NIV. Rather than the old NIV, siding with the chosen one of God instead of the Son of God. And it was thought that this description was changed somewhat later in later manuscripts so that no one might wrongfully suggest, it was changed so no one might wrongfully suggest that the Father chose Jesus as a result of some human worthiness. That didn't happen. And that as a result of some alleged human worthiness, that he became a god. What? A human becoming a god? Serious? As if anything human might possibly be all that worthy. That's an awfully arrogant idea, a blasphemous idea. Yet it's an idea that remains very popular to this day. An idea held by adoptionists, such as Mormons, who call themselves Church of Jesus Christ, who think that they might become gods someday. What? Yes. Gods with their very own planet to rule. And that, such is the Mormon fantasy. We see a picture of that outlined as well. And it's not just Brigham Young who expands on this, but there's others as well. That is the Mormon fantasy of becoming gods as well. So as Corey mentioned this morning, they think they're going to be omni-something someday. Ain't going to happen. So, just what part of the Logos was God are they not understanding? Just what part? Was it the was part? Heaven forbid that we should be so blasphemous. However, right from the very beginning, Jesus had the authority to lay it down, and Jesus had the authority to take it back up again, which we'll read in chapter 10 as we get there. No other godly authority was adopted by him at any time in eternity, and no other godly authority was required by him at any time in eternity. The was simply was, whereas we will remain fledglings forever. Omni, nothing.